Welcome to Intro to Factoring by Grouping. The first thing you should know is that factoring by grouping can only be done if you have 4 or more terms. For example, 4 terms, 6 terms, 8 terms, and so on, but it has to be at least 4. What you're going to do is take your expression and break it up into 2 groups. From there, you're going to factor out the GCF of each group. So my GCF is a squared, and I'm going to be left with a plus 1. Now, my GCF of the second one is 2, but what you're always going to do with factoring by grouping is factor out the sign of the first term there that we're for our group. So we're going to factor out a negative 2. If that was a plus 2a, you would factor out a plus 2. Always keep the same sign. And now you're going to have a plus 1. In order to make sure you're doing this correctly, you want to make sure that your 2 sets of parentheses have the same thing inside them. Ours are the same, so we know we did good. If they're not the same, then you need to start over. You're going to take what's in the parentheses, and if you notice a plus 1 and a plus 1, that's your GCF of both groups. So I'm going to take out the GCF, and then I'm going to take my leftovers. And you're going to check to see, can that be factored anymore? And no, it cannot, so you're done. Now, don't write anything yet for this one, but check what happens if you go and factor this. You make 2 groups. There's no GCF of the first group. And yeah, there's a GCF of the second group, but there's no GCF of the first group. You can't factor it like this. Now, if you can't factor it the original way it's given to you, then you should reorder it. However, some questions are purposely put in the order that they're in. That way you can factor it to begin with. So always try to factor by grouping with whatever you're given first. And if that doesn't work, then you can go put it in standard form. So I'm going to rewrite this as x cubed plus 5x squared minus x minus 5. And then I'm going to try again. Again, my middle sign is a negative, so I'm going to factor out a negative. Now, they don't really have a GCF, right? X and 5. So instead, I'm just going to take out a 1. And this becomes an x plus 5, because when you factor out the negative, you take the opposite signs for your insides. I have the same thing in my parentheses, so I know I'm good to go. I'm going to take what's in my parentheses, that GCF of x plus 5, write it on the outside. I'm going to take my leftovers now and write that in the other parentheses. I'm going to check to make sure that no more factoring can be done to this. And if you look at it, this is dots. So I'm going to bring down my x plus 5, and then I'm going to factor this. X plus 1, x minus 1, or x minus 1 times x plus 1, whatever you want. And now I'm fully factored. Why don't you pause the video and try the next 2 on your own. When you're done, come back to the video to see if you're correct. You're going to break it up into 2 groups, take out the GCF, and you're going to be left with a minus 2. Take out the GCF of the next one, your middle term is a plus, so you take out a plus 3. My insides are the same, that's good. I'm going to take my insides, and now I'm going to take my outsides. I can't factor anymore, so I'm done. And the next one, make your 2 groups, factor out the GCFs, and I'm going to be left with 5x minus 1. The next one had no GCF, but there is a negative in the middle term, so you're going to take out a negative 1. And you're left with 5x, change the signs because you took out a negative, minus 1. Insides are good. take your leftovers. And of course, check for additional factoring like you have in this case, right? Because this is dots again, just like in example 2. And you're done. So in this case, we have 6 terms. Now you can combine like terms, and you can try reordering and putting it in standard form, but I told you first, if you want to do this problem by grouping, leave it the way it is. If you can't factor it by grouping the way it is, then start changing things around. Now you can make groups of 3 if you wanted to, but honestly that doesn't really help me because I don't want to factor those trinomials either. What I'm going to do instead is I'm going to make 3 groups of 2, and I'm going to take the GCF out of all of them. So I'm going to take out a squared and be left with a squared plus 7. My next GCF is 4a, and I'm going to be left again with a squared plus 7. The fact that I got 2 parentheses to be the same means I'm probably doing something right. My last GCF is 2, and I'm going to be left with a squared plus 7. Everything on the inside matches, and that's phenomenal. So I'm going to pull out that GCF of a squared plus 7 because all my groups have that in common. I'm going to take my leftovers, and in this case, I'm going to get a trinomial. A squared plus 4a plus 2. Now, a squared plus 7 can't be factored. However, check to see if this can be factored. Do we have 2 numbers that multiply to 2 and add to 4? And it doesn't look like we do. So, clearly, since nothing can be factored anymore, you are done. So keep in mind that factoring by grouping needs at least 4 terms or more, but the or more part has to have an even amount of terms, right? If you have an expression with 6 terms, and if you want to factor by grouping, try breaking it up into 3 groups of 2 first. And always make sure that you try to group the way it's given to you first. If that doesn't work, then you can reorder it. And that's all for this video.